What is going on, you guys? Theo here with the big review, back yet again with another King of Fighters All-Star video, and today we are going to be continuing our beginner and intermediate guide to budget characters for the yellow element. So before we get started, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe as we continue to climb the ladder to 500 subscribers before the end of January. So before we get into these picks, I do want to say, if you can't already tell, there are a ton of collab picks for yellow, so we're going to go ahead and try and cherry pick some that are not collab, and then we'll move on to the collab characters, and then even some super budget options for team relays. So this is going to be Ramon. He's going to increase yellow element fighters' critical rate by 11% and their crit damage by 65%. If we move over to his cores, we're going to see that he is going to have increases critical rate by 5% for 5 seconds upon a successful basic attack, and increases guard penetration by 700, penetration by 1500 for 10 seconds upon landing a crit. So he is very crit based. You'll also see that he has super armor on 2 of his 3 skills, as well as crit rate increase by 15% for 5 seconds on his S3. Ramon was actually a very top flight pick for the low-cost infinite battle, for the gold border infinite battle, as it were. He was actually very, very strong there. He's also very strong in times when championship allows only for gold border characters back in the day, so he actually had his niches. Anymore, I think he's more of just a general kind of decent yellow pick for kind of PvE content as far as story mode's concerned. He isn't really going to be anything special for a lot of these different game modes. He's not going to be able to boss the best because he is predicated upon a lot of grab skills. So outside of having kind of a fun kit with crit rate increases and then having the super armor sources on 2 of his 3 skills, he's just kind of okay for PvE. But let's go ahead and talk about the Halloween Party Angel. She's going to increase Halloween fighters' attack by 20% and crit rate by 9% and their critical damage by 50%. So, moving on to her cores, she inflicts poison damage equal to 20% of attack upon landing a critical hit, and increases critical rate by 7% for 5 seconds upon a successful basic attack, and that resets upon landing a crit. So, the reason you would use this Angel is for the poison damage, and that's really it. She's going to have poison on her S3 as well. So overall with her, you're just using her as another super budget poison character, as you will for a lot of the angels. If you haven't noticed, I think I've talked about at least one other angel in this series of videos in the past, which if you haven't seen those, I'll be sure to link them in the description, as we are starting to come to the end of this guide for beginners and intermediates. But with her, she's just going to be overall a character you would use really just for her poison damage, and really would have no other reason to ever kind of consider her. You know, the problem with her is that her kit is pretty sparse overall, and she's an old character. I mean, this was from the first set of Halloween characters, so she's kind of outdated at this point, and she was never anything super special to begin with. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be Angel. If you need a budget poison option on yellow, she's going to be your girl, but she isn't going to do a whole lot else for you. So let's go ahead and move on to a quality silver pick. So this Kim here, you're definitely going to want to consider for the team relays, as well as some of the low-cost missions, such as your Epic Quest low-cost missions. So you'll probably want to see if you've got him laying around, which you should, because he's just a silver border character. But he's very strong as a leader for the low-cost missions. So if you can put together, and you'll see a couple of other pretty good options for low-cost yellows in this video, but if you can go ahead and use him for some of those missions, you will notice that he actually does very well. He has a lot of kind of crit-based skills going on his kit, so he is an overall decent damage dealer for low-cost characters. You know, when it comes to any of these silver or bronze even border characters, which yes, I am even going to point out a couple of bronze borders in this video for those of you who keep asking about low-cost characters, but he is going to be very decent for this stuff. You know, I'm never going to say that any of these characters are super great as far as these very low rarity ones, but with this Kim, he will do you pretty decent in these different modes where they call for it. and I've used him to get through several of them. Like I said, I actually used him to get through the ones in Epic Quest when I was going for Topaz. So overall, this Kim is pretty good, and I would definitely recommend him. And again, you'll see some other characters in this video you can use with his leadership. So moving on to one of the better picks overall, this Mei Li's great. She's going to increase Yellow Element Fighter's attack by 50% right off the bat. That's really good. And then if you go through her cores here, her cores are pretty good overall. So yeah, she has shock damage on there, you'll see. And yeah, she is actually really strong. I actually have not built mine up, and I might actually just do that while we're talking about her. Because I want to use her for different things and test her out. But she has actually some pretty interesting skills, decreasing the enemy's power charge rate by 35% for 7 seconds upon landing a skill. And then she's going to have more shock on her kit here, as you'll see. So she is actually a pretty fun little character, and she's one of the better budget options, I would say, for Yellow. I've seen a lot of people that have actually built her up to A5 and really, really like her. So if you want a good budget option, she's probably, of all the ones we've talked about so far, the best one, I would say. This Mei Li, I would say, is actually kind of low-key underrated for budget option characters, because I don't really see a whole lot of people talk about her when they talk about some of these gold border characters, and I get the feeling that they're kind of just overlooking her. You'll actually see she has a very long finisher as well, so overall, I really like this Mei Li for budget players and for people who need kind of a low-cost alternative. So I would definitely look at her. She's also a yellow attack, which you will need for reviving Hell's Dungeon. So my opinion of her, I'm actually going to build her up right now while we're here, might as well. But yeah, overall, I think that she is a character you should probably really take a look at and consider if you are needing budget options, or even a third for kind of a budget option for RHD to get you through that tier. But let's go ahead and move on and talk about Baseball Shermie. She's going to increase defense-type fighters' attack by 40% and their power charge rate by 20%. So she has a really good leadership skill overall. That's actually her biggest asset, I would say. But if you go down here to her cores, she's going to decrease damage received. She's going to have gain super armor on her core as well. So she's going to have some super armor in her kit, and having it on your core is always nice. So yeah, she isn't a bad character overall. You'll see on her skills too that she's going to have super armor as well there, and she actually has an interrupt on that skill, which is pretty nice. She has a stun, so she actually has a really nice kit overall for a gold border character. I would say that outside of that Mei Li, this is probably the next best pick that I could give you. I'm not going to say again that any of these characters are going to be meta shifters or meta breakers or even be meta in any way, shape, or form. But this Shermie is definitely not bad for, again, if you are a new player, an intermediate player, a beginner, you know, you're just starting out, you're needing kind of budget options. That's what these videos are for, and she pretty much fits that bill overall. You know, having the ability to say that she has 2 sources of super armor, one on her actual skills, one on her cores, and then that she also is going to have that leadership skill. That's pretty good. I wish she were a yellow attack, because that would actually add a ton to her versatility for kind of PvE content. But, you know, beggars can't be choosers. I would say that this is going to be a very solid pick for yellow, and I would definitely look at her if you are needing the help. So let's go ahead and move on to super budget options now. So let's talk about this Heavy D. So with the characters I'm about to talk about, the reason you would use these is literally just for Team Relay. I don't really think that there's much else that you would ever use these characters for. I'm not even really going to get into kind of the different aspects of their kit too much, because you'll see they're very bare bones. I mean, very, very bare bones. There's little to nothing going on with these bronze characters. So literally the reason why I'm throwing these in here is if you're a person who is trying to get through Team Relay and you need options that are going to be even more budget than some of the gold border characters, even some of the silver border characters, this Heavy D, you'll actually, just go ahead and type into your search bar if you're looking for a specific low-cost relay dungeon that you need to get through. You'll see that this Heavy D gets used a ton. I used him myself to clear it, so This Heavy D is not bad at all as far as that is concerned. He'll get the job done. Like I said, I've seen tons of people use him for that purpose. So overall, he's going to be good for that, but little else. So don't go thinking that, I've gone crazy and think that this character is somehow going to be some sort of PvE relevant character. He's not. He's just going to be good for that specific kind of function. But speaking of good for a specific function, this Iori, same difference. He's basically just going to be there to help you out with relay dungeons. I wouldn't necessarily consider him for much else outside of that. Maybe you would consider him for, other low-cost missions like in the Epic Quest or something like that. But otherwise, he isn't really anything special. Again, you'll see that he has a very bare-bones kit. So, not a whole lot going on with him, but really you just kind of got to pick from what you have available to you for some of those missions. And really with him, he is decent. He's another Iori, and all the Ioris tend to have very similar kind of kits going on as far as their skills go. So, he's definitely not, again, anything special, but I would definitely say that if you, again, need a low-cost character, he's going to be able to help you out in that regard. And hey, even if you don't really get much use out of him outside of that after you've built him up, at least you can watch these beautiful finishers, because Iori still has some of the nicest. Like, look at this one. Look at this one. Look at this finisher. It's beautiful. Still has some of the coolest looking finishers for any of these characters. So, yeah. Iori, decent, but nothing special. Another low-cost alternative. So, let's go ahead, now that we're done with some of these super budget options, and talk about do a kind of a montage for these collab characters. Again, I don't like to go into a ton of these, because I realize that new players, which is what these videos are geared towards, aren't going to have all these characters, but I still want to talk about them in these videos. We'll start with Charlotte. For those of you who are not aware, Charlotte is going to be the Bleed Queen. She is phenomenal overall as far as a gold border pick goes. She was in the Sam Show collab, so for those of you new players out there, you're probably going to be unable to attain her. But as I've said about the Sam Show collab in the past, there is every chance in the world that it does come back later on, because it is an SNK property. So that Charlotte, phenomenal as always. As far as an even older collab, Kazuya. Kazuya is still, in my opinion, the closest to being a Fess character of any of the gold border characters that we have gotten. Kazuya, in my opinion, is he's right there. If he ever gets buffed, he's going to be something kind of interesting to look at. But he has damage immunity, he has that fantastic 100% chance to reset his cooldown upon a successful attack on his S1. He has a 40% chance to stun the enemy for 2 seconds when he lands a skill. He's going to also have the Tekken core that is exclusive to them, which is phenomenal as well. So overall, he is a great character, and still to this day a mini Fess. Kind of a newer collab character, the Doctor of Thugonomics, John Cena. I'm a big wrestling fan, and not a big John Cena fan. I hate to say it, but this John Cena's good. So, yeah, not to turn total heel on John here, but this John Cena is very popular for budget options amongst players for a lot of reasons. He's actually a really good option for the RHD for people that need a yellow attack type to round out their team. So a lot of people use him, but again, for you newer players that would find these videos helpful in the first place, you're probably not going to have a lot of these guys, unfortunately. But if you for some reason do, and you need a good budget option, maybe for the RHD, maybe you only have 2 yellow attacks to get you through and you need another one, well, John, you could do far worse than him. So, moving on here to, so, Okita is a great striker. That I'm going to leave it at that. You'll see a lot of people use him in the guild raid, especially for the expert mission. And yeah, he's a very, very strong striker, so that's where you'd consider him. Seth Rollins here is really good as well. He is another wrestler I don't like. So anyway, not to get into wrestling, because then we'd be here all day. But this Seth Rollins is pretty decent. A lot of people used to use him, especially for kind of a sleeper pick for things like PVAI and even Championship. Anymore, though, he has just kind of become a budget option for PvE. He can't really keep up in any of that anymore, really, but, you know, he's pretty decent overall if you need a budget option. He has a balance, though, which I would say he kind of automatically is worse than a lot of these other ones, just because, you know, here's another option with Ukio. Ukio's decent as well. He did not see near as much kind of use as some of these other ones that we've talked about, but if you need another kind of deep cut for an option, then he would be a decent one. But again, I don't think a whole lot of you beginner or intermediate players that would be watching this for the help wouldn't have many of these anyway. So, you know, there may be some more in here that are decent budget options, but that's pretty much who I wanted to talk about in today's video. I think we pretty much covered the biggest ones. So let's go ahead and move on and test the Boss Syndrome characters against Immortal Victor. And yeah, so spoiler alert, this went exceedingly well and is disgusting to watch. I have been intending to test these guys out against him since they're pretty much were released. I figured that they would be pretty good for Immortal Victor, and I wanted to kind of see how cheesy it would be. And as I theorized, it's ridiculous. So what I want you guys to watch with this clip, and what I really want to point out here, is check the clock stop ability of this team. So you're going to notice this is an extremely fast run on Immortal Victor. And this is also going to be kind of ridiculous as far as the clock stopping ability that this team has, and I think it's a really good showcase of what this team, or not just this team, but what these characters, these Boss Syndrome characters, are capable of. And I had talked about a lot in the reviews about how I felt that their biggest strong suit for bossing was going to end up being, outside of obviously their really good damage, was going to be their clock stopping ability, specifically with Orochi, which I feel like Orochi's biggest claim to fame for some of these things is going to be his, you know, clock management skill. And overall, I don't feel like I was wrong. I feel like I was extremely on the money with this. It's ridiculous to me if you watch this. I mean, these guys pretty much, I don't remember exactly what the clock ends at once I finish this run. I want to say it's like 35 seconds or so. I could be off a second or two. But yeah, this team just goes in there and they just fire off finisher after finisher. Now, you'll even notice too, and it happens several times in this run, that Omega Rugal having that grab finisher, which we've talked about being kind of a goofy thing. You know, it's not necessarily ideal for characters to have grab finishers, especially for bossing. And he uses it quite a bit here and basically wastes spars. But it never really hurts the run at all. It does nothing to affect the run at all. So he's even able to ignore that with this comp. And I'll show you guys the cards after this, but I'm using Orochi as the leader for this because he is buffing both characters. And really, outside of that, it's basically just everything to do with the power of the Boss Syndrome characters overall. These two characters, I mean, if these are indicative of what we're doing as far as Boss Syndrome characters in the future and what they're going to look like, I mean, I don't really know what to say. And I think it's right here where things start to just get crazy with the rotation. Because at the beginning, I actually wasn't even really paying attention to rotating through my skills and my characters as well as I should have. Maybe for the first, like, I'd say 5-10 seconds. So I probably could have finished this even quicker, but I was honestly, this was my first time using this team on him. This is my first run with this team on him. And so it was basically one of those things where I was trying to get used to him real quick, and I don't know what to say about it other than the fact that these guys are definitely the best team I've used for Immortal Victor. Obviously, Immortal Victor is not the most difficult of the Immortals. Most people that have, you know, are past the intermediate stages and are getting into the advanced stages of the game and kind of into the end game content are able to do really well on him or beat him in general. But yeah, as you'll see here, it looks like 34 seconds is what I'm going to finish him at. Yeah, well, 33. Well, it was 34 when he hit 0, but I digress. But yeah, so that is the Boss Syndrome characters versus Immortal Victor. And yeah, if you have Boss Syndrome characters and you're looking to speed up your runs so that these don't feel like they're so tedious, then definitely slot these guys in. Orochi is actually going to be effective against him. He's going to have the element. He's going to have the element advantage, as it were. So you'll see my kind of card setup here is pretty standard, just using the Orochi set on him, and then just your standard Maxima cooldown cards. This is really the MVP for this. I mean, the PvE exclusive of gaining the 2% power is fantastic for bossing. This set's really good in general. So using his leadership skill, like I said as well, to buff the charge rate on this team was very key. That's a big part of the reason why I was able to manage the clock as best as I was here. So, you know, moving on to Rugal, it's going to be pretty standard as well. It's another of the Orochi sets, and then I'm using, obviously, the Rugal option card, which is going to have the 50% chance to increase attack by 13% for 5 seconds upon landing a strike. So then I have Immortal Successor, which, as you guys have heard me say in the past numerous times, is probably my favorite as far as cooldown reduction option cards go. I just think that this card is phenomenal. And so, yeah. And then Gonitz, I believe I just have, we'll take a look here, but I believe I just have a Tekken set. Yeah, I have a Tekken set, and then the Gintama option, as well as another Immortal Successor. So, yeah, that's pretty much it today, guys. I just wanted to show you this for those of you who are clearing Immortal Victor whenever he's out daily and need to help kind of take away some of the tedium and do it maybe a little bit quicker. And I also wanted to test out Boss Syndrome characters in a different mode. So anyway, guys, that's going to be today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe as we climb to 500 subs before the end of the month, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.